Welcome back to the Keep Going podcast with Vin Kennedy. I'm your host, Vin Kennedy. Today we have a special guest. This is Matt. Matt, you want to do a brief intro?
Yeah, when you first told me to do a brief intro, I'm like, where do I begin? Because like how do you condense, right?
Right.
But I mean, I've been like a digital native like since the internet like popped off. I mean, I started very, very, very young. I went to school for international business. Like all my degrees were in international business, but like the internet game was so early that when I went to school, and the guidance counselors, at the university were like, well, what do you want to do? International business, what do you want to do? I'm like, the internet. And they're like, yeah, we can't
Right.
help you. I'm like, yeah, I know. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. They're like, well, what do you
Uncharted
like?
waters.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and they were like, they were genuinely curious. They're like, well, what do you want to do with the internet? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, international business, other countries,
Right.
connect to the internet, and they
Yeah.
just, it was so new, and I was so young that like, it was uncharted waters. And I was like, okay, well, welcome to my entrepreneurial journey,
Yeah.
figuring it all out,
Was it
um,
the newness that really drew you to it?
there was so many different things. I felt like, so I'm a few years younger than Gary V, but I get him from, we were like that weird, the 90s, the mid 90s, and like there's AOL going on. You're like, what is this? This is interesting. Like you could start to see that like you can connect with people. Obviously that can go in a lot of different directions. But I saw the good direction of it. And it was cool to start sharing ideas with people and be like, oh, we create this. Oh, this is our hobby. This is what we do. And you could see how fast connectivity can create like new ideas, new possibilities, all that stuff. And I was like, this is going to be inevitable. I think it was
Right.
I just naturally just knew. I'm like, this is just going to be inevitable.
Yeah.
This is before social media, right? So that led me to, I did choose a field. I originally went into the music industry, Virgin Records in Beverly Hills, like in the A&R department. And
Mhm.
as quickly as I got in, as quickly as I got out, I was all about digital music, and there was a lot of fighting going on. So this is where I really start to kind of see, and like, oh wow, everything I seem to want to do is very opposite the corporate infrastructure, right? All good. And then, like iTunes came out and they were like, what do we do? I was
Right.
like, you can embrace it. And they're like, no, 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 no. And, welcome to what the music industry has become. So I got out and I did my first tech startup, not knowing anything, nothing about how the internet is made, or like the back end, the front end, all
Yeah.
of the things. And that's really where I ended up learning everything, from just sitting with really interesting developers and designers, teaching me a lot of stuff. The startup didn't make it, but it sure as hell taught me a lot about business and law and finance and pretty much everything you can imagine.
Yeah.
During that time, in order to sustain, I actually got into real estate before the 2000s boom, right? Like the 2005, 6, 7, 8. I was a kid. And I was making websites to get leads. And so I was generating all these leads. And I was able to like do a lot of, home sales.
Right.
And so a lot of like the mortgage companies and, service providers and real estate companies were like, who are you and how'd you do
Right.
this?
Yeah. Seriously.
Kind of had that, like not everybody. I mean, most didn't know. There was a few that on the side were like, hey, are you like getting leads and stuff,
Right.
And they would put me to the side, and that's kind of how I became a digital strategist. It wasn't even like a title, but
Right.
basically, how do you take a business and how do you use the internet to drive traffic, sales, like leads, right? So this is becoming like my life while I'm like in real estate, and eventually I went and got my MBA. I was an outcast there too. Great school. Thunderbird at the time was the #1 international business school, and but I was the only digital guy there. Now they all have jobs in digital. At the time, I was raising my hand a lot, and they're like, yeah, well, digital is not really as important. It's not this, it's not that. I'm like, okay, here we go again,
Right.
but it did help me get in with brands like Louis Vuitton, Moet, Hennessy in New York and France. And that was when digital really started to pop off, 2010, 2012. And getting in early helped have like brand recognition, like, oh wow, like you were a part of some of these brands as they were transitioning into digital more. And that was great. And then it was really 2014 that my whole world changed, and why I got onto the internet for myself. I went through both divorce and like I lost all these contracts that I was doing really well. Not Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, they were amazing. I was already done working with them. I was working with some other brands. I won't say their names. And just all the, all these contracts went away. And yet I'd done a really good job. So I was like, this is weird.
Right.
So I took to the internet to talk about entrepreneurship, life, relationships, mental health, all these things that I didn't like that that entrepreneurship was being glamorized in all the media. I didn't like it at all. And I was like, no, we're going to have real conversations, before authenticity became a trend. And I was like, let's actually have real conversations about this stuff. I did it on my first account, HDF Magazine, which just skyrocketed. I still have that account, but I haven't used it in a couple of years. I just leave it as like kind of a, memory, but I pushed that thing for 6 years, 7 years. And then, throughout that, a couple of us, were building a media company throughout all of our channels. And, we learned a lot about media and growth during this whole crazy last 5, 6, 7 years, as we've seen. And, long story long, that, we all decided to split up in about 2019. I turned my consultancy into an agency, for like sales and marketing automations and things like that, because that's like, systems, like, which really is more of a byproduct of my father was passing in 2019. And I was just rethinking my life about like how we approach anything, everything, time, most importantly. And so it turned into an agency, which I've, since it's still there, it's still functioning. My right hand takes care of it. And now I'm just building on, more of my writing, more of just my brand, because it's, I just have bigger things I want to do and bring to the world. So, she takes care of that, my head of operations. And, but yeah, it was my dad that really kind of sparked the next change. So 2014, 2019 were very pivotal years, very transformative years. And, so.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And one of the ongoing themes there's obviously like kind of going against the grain. And like, it sounds like even before, obviously you wanted to be an entrepreneur, but even before making that clear distinction, you were an entrepreneur. I mean, just like the restarts and the going against the grain is what like, how did you kind of fight that? Because I feel like now it's almost popular not to enjoy crypto. But back then it had to be, you were the outcast, like you said. So like, how did you kind of navigate that?
Let's see. When are you gonna get a real job? By the way, my family, my parents, awesome. They like, I had a very entrepreneurial family, not just my parents, but throughout our whole lineage. My father was a very big proponent of like, he was a very work ethic, integrity driven, savvy business person. And he was also like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're going to have to figure that out for yourself, kid. Like kind of his mantra, but not out of like, it was actually all out of love. Like, you got it. Like, this is your life, and you're going to feel so much better about making the choices that you want and how that's going to govern you, and he was very supportive of like different choices I made. He'd try to like learn them. So whenever he thought I was crazy, that man was like, interesting, and he'd actually find information on the internet or in books. He'd be like, I see what you're doing. Like, this is interesting, but yeah, when you're during that time, like, the late 90s, the 2000s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, for a long time, just pretty much before social media, really, like until it really started taking off. Entrepreneurship was very much looked at as sort of like, when you're gonna, kind of be responsible. What's the responsible thing to do? And I'm like, I may not be there yet, but you all don't also seem happy about what you're doing. I was like, I get it. It's cool. It's good that, you're bringing in, money and, hopefully you're not sacrificing health, which a lot of them were, or, their soul or other things, but then I was also around a lot of entrepreneurial people too, and they kept me really solid in the game, in the real estate game, in the tech game, in the mortgage game, like, all of like they're all entrepreneurs. So it made sense that even in the real estate world, it's like, it was cool. Like I never actually really got to talk about that. I actually felt like seen when I was actually working in real estate while trying to build the tech startup, because it was just sort of like everybody there is an entrepreneur of sorts, you know. And but outside of that, it was very misunderstood. And the way I combated it was just you know, I think anytime I felt very protected. Anytime I tried to, like, you know, want to go into that route that seemed more quote unquote safe or secure, which we all know is not, especially now. But it was like the door would be shut, and I was like, okay. And I used to fight that until after a while, I'm like, yes, where are we going? What's happening? That, like, I knew it. It was either God, it was like a blessing. Something was happening that I'm like, no, I'm not supposed to be there. I'm gonna go find a window over here, you know. So
So true. Yeah. So it kind of also sounds like, so obviously just things were blocking for good reason. And then at the same time, you
yeah,
just had a strong support system now. Yeah,
yeah.
really propelling you. Yeah.
You got to find people who are like also, you know, figuring it out themselves too, that are going against the grain, you know, doing something different. They'll definitely keep you sane. And now, like, my circle, you know, is, I love my circle. Like we're all doing it, you know, our own way, and keeping our, like, we'll call each other up and be like, hey, I'm tagging in, like, give me something real quick. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, give me something, like, listen, here's what's going on. Here's how you know, you got this. Very like Rocky Creed, like, you know, there's a lot of
Right.
that going on. We're like, I'm not crazy, right? They're like, no, you're not crazy. Like this. I'm like, cool. They're like, tag me back in, you know?
Yeah.
So
You know what I think I love about entrepreneurship, and just hearing you talk about it kind of really hit it on the head, is where people that work a steady 9 to 5, or that are, in corporate, and of course, some people, more power to you if you enjoy it. It's definitely a respectable way to make money
yeah,
and respectable way to live. But I feel like they think they're done, if that makes sense. Where you find an entrepreneur, and even I'm sure your circle, like, where you could tag in because it's a never evolving process. And I think that's the game changer, and that's life. Because no one
yeah.
ever has it all figured out.
Yeah. It's, well, I just wrote about this too, how like entrepreneurship is the fastest path to personal development, because you don't really have the luxury of making the same mistakes twice. And so two things are happening. You're always learning something new about yourself, and you're always learning something new about people, right? Because, like, you know, you're constantly learning about yourself. Like, how can I do something better and evolve faster, or as fast as I can? Um, or, you know, okay, and I'm doing something of service to people in exchange of value. And so I'm constantly learning about the dynamic of people and all the things in between. So yeah, so it's a very it forces you to have to look at yourself all the time, all the time. And that also has, you know, one of my dear friends said it the other day. She was like, she said, she's like, oh, what a great day. I was like, yeah, right. She goes, yeah, the bully didn't come out. It's like the bully left me alone for the day. I was like, oof, I feel that. I was like, I'm having that kind of week. The bully isn't, like, you know, because we're good to ourselves, but at the same time, you can easily be hard on yourself when when you put yourself under the microscope a lot. So you have to, there's a lot of harmony and balance in there that has to happen, because you want to always be improving, but you always want to be demonstrating grace with yourself and others. So
Yeah,
it's never
no,
ending.
absolutely. It really is. And then, so obviously you touched on the passing of your father, and how did that kind of propel that change? Because you said that was like another crucial point in your life.
Yeah. I was 39, and I remember, and he was 76, and I'm just thinking, that's young. I mean, and I was 39, and I'm like doing the math, and I'm like, no, you know, could that have been prevented? Now, spiritually, I think everybody here is here for a very specific time. We don't know what that is. We have to make use of the present. But it did force me to think about, how am I using my time? And am I um, really not just being present, but like, am I understanding how I'm using it? Am I, you know, what's going on in my day? How am I governing myself? Am I giving myself enough time for the important things? What is important? What isn't important? I mean, it sent me down a whole, like, you know, personal optimization, human optimization route, biohacking to, I mean, I'd always been into like learning a lot of things, like learning a lot of through, there's a lot of really great people out there that taught these things and motivational, all that stuff. But this was just different. It was a different kind of work. And I think I just finally turned the work so much more inward than ever before. Whereas like, okay, we're gonna really closely, observe our time. And
Right.
I was gonna look at, what am I doing with my day? And like, what is it that I want to see change? And why are certain things still patterning a way that I'm like, okay, why does that keep happening? So I got very genuinely curious about me, in a way that um, allowed myself to kind of really get to know myself at a whole new level. And so, yeah, so it was looking at, food and nutrition. It was looking at my body. It was looking at time. It was looking at what I was building and why, in business, and what was I doing and where do I need to make shifts. It was looking at finances and wealth and thinking about like, hey, like, how do you rethink, things working for you? Like, I was like, I'm
Right.
hitting 40. 40 as a man is a very, it was a good energy. It was a very different energy. It's a very like, you feel so like, I once heard a spiritual mentor say to me, we take all the experience before 40 and we turn it into wisdom. Better. By the time you're 40, better. And so your decision making, your work has to change. It has to work for you, not like just like, you have to be really thinking through it. And so I really started to think about how was I going to build in my 40s differently, than how I previously had done it. And so, yeah, you have all these like these changes happening all at once. And but I felt more equipped than ever before. I felt like the 20s and 30s showed me, okay, like I got this. Like, it's definitely, don't get me wrong, it's definitely like climbing Mount Everest. You know what I mean? Like, you feel it some days. You're like, wow, like you're taking a breath, but it's calmer, it's more controlled. I got rid of 90% of the things that are unimportant. I know exactly what I'm doing with my day. Um, I My discernment went through the roof. I say no to a lot of things that don't really need my time. So I have plenty of time for the things I want. I do deep work every day on the things that I want. I get more done in 6 hours of deep work. I have afternoons and evenings off if I want them to. Um, Sometimes I don't, only because I'm just building some new stuff, but
Right.
I have that option, so it really, it did just, it changed everything. And it was a very like breaking from the attachments of old things and old ways of moving. And you feel it, at first, because your nervous system's like, whoa,
Right.
what are you doing? This is different, so
Absolutely.
yeah.
So it sounds like also like kind of like a lot of self exploration there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you know without our health, we're nothing. And everybody says it, but I really got to learn that more than ever up close and personal. That year was tough because my father passed, my uncle passed, a friend of mine was actually shot and killed. I know it's a little extreme for a podcast, but like it was a freak accident, but like it was what it was. But and he was always he was just there, like he was taking off. And so it was a blow, like, just there was a lot happening all in that year. And so I was like, all right, more than ever, health and peace, no chaos. Like, I just wanted to be around, um, as I wanted to create and cultivate this world around me. And so I really doubled down on health. And um, we were talking right before the podcast. It's funny when you put health first, everything else starts to like make a
It's crazy.
lot more sense. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's freakishly cool. Because
Yeah.
one, it's not just because a lot of people I think, when you're really working out and doing the nutrition, that it's about the external. The external is the byproduct. The internal, like, your brain function changes, no brain fog, your energy goes through the roof, your system feels cleaner and lighter, so you're like making decisions differently. um you feel like your body wanting to do more, like you can connect the dots more, like and then the external world, how you're, because you're earning it and you're doing all this work, you know, no, I can't. I have to do this. And no, your decision making changes completely to the
So
things you
true.
say yes to like maybe eating out all the time, which I stopped. Like I really wasn't doing as much, but like now I really don't. Like I cook everything. Like you think about all these different things, and then it bleeds over into your work, and then it bleeds over into your creativity, and then it bleeds over into your finances. You start like your health really is the catalyst for everything. And you know, for me, health and spirituality, health and God, like those two things have really helped me like just stay just connected to myself, so I can make clear decisions on how I want to move versus just kind of like, you know, like free floating a little bit too much. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I feel that so I'm actually currently doing 75 hard phase one,
done it
and
twice.
it's awesome. And the
Hmm.
phase one has a couple of cool components, but I know that one of the things that Andy still talks about too is like picking up trash on your walk. And before he even said that, I started doing that. Like it's weird. I became a better person. Like
Yeah.
I was always someone to hold doors and say thank you, but like I noticed myself doing it more, and it's just because you instill this discipline in the way that you live your life.
So true.
Yeah.
That's a really great observation. It's true. Like I'd always, you know, held doors open. I was always very, you know, conscious in that capacity, but like it's the details. It becomes starting like these little things. And you know, and even things that you might have like used to stress over, like you don't, and you find
Right.
yourself like, yeah, like, um, you know, just now everything around my house, I'm like, if it can be done in less than 2 minutes, I just do it right then and there,
Right.
you know, and you're like, and everything is a, well, I said it on a podcast, one of my podcasts, everything good is a discipline, but it's like, because there's freedom in discipline. There's so much freedom in it. We've been sold a lie that, you know, discipline is, you know, it's not freeing. It's very, you know, strict and this and
Right.
that. Like, that's just because it was sold to us that way, you
Right.
know.
So, so true. And something that just been on my mind is I was at I was at a place, and basically I walked away and someone said something to my little sister about how I've been making a lot of changes in my life as well. And, somebody was just talking to her. Basically, my life is very geared around fitness.
Mhm.
And from there, everything else kind of has opened up. It's opened up doors and opportunities that I would have never had without it. But one thing that was said is that like I'm right now, I've been running marathons for the past 7 months, and like
Mhm.
I did two in 7 months. Now I'm doing a half, and I'm diving into ultra running, and it's just like it's been a game changer mentally, physically. But it was said that you're not like I just don't get why he does this. Like he's not a millionaire. Like he treats his days as if he's like a millionaire that has all the money in the world that could just go run marathons. And it's like one, if that's how you view my life, I think I'm a millionaire running marathons, technically I'm probably doing something right. But second, it's defining success to yourself. And like you said, it's mentally I'm in the best place I've ever been. I don't deal with drama. I do and I come and go as I please. I say no to a lot. And yeah, it really comes back to just unlocking that physical. And the one thing that I've kind of been emphasizing on my stories and social media is that like no one has to get it. Like it does not have to make sense
Yeah.
to anyone else.
Yeah.
And like if I'm franchising a gym in the spring, and like that's my goal. That's all I want. If I could walk into a gym and I don't care if I have to be there 23 hours a day, I'm happy. Like I'm winning. Like that's it.
Yeah.
People, it's crazy that people don't get that.
I love that you said that because that is winning, you know,
Yeah.
and people don't have to get it. But after a while, they do sure start to ask questions when they see like you're like, you seem really happy. You're like, yeah,
Right.
like, and or wow, you've really grown. And you're like, thanks. You know, they're like, how'd you do it? I'm like, I showed you the whole way.
Right.
You know,
It's
like,
true.
but you know, you know, everybody in their time. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's great that you brought that up. It's like winning is doing what feel that brings you joy. And ironically, you know, and I've been preaching this pretty heavy though, especially the last year, you can earn an amazing living from your joy, from the things that you love to do because you're just so immersed in it. And people are like, oh no, I don't believe that. I'm like, Kobe Bryant.
Right.
You know, I was like, no, obviously you got a little bit of a different system over there with the NBA and like, you
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
corporatism and all this. I was like, but he was a different breed altogether. I was like, he loved what he did. So the reason the discipline was there is because it brought him so much joy. He was literally like, no, wait, how can I make my shot better and better and better and better and better? How can I show up at 3 a.m.? Like, that's why I love putting so many Kobe, you know, videos up. Cause I'm like, it's such a mentality because there's that mixture of like joy and discipline.
Right.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, even I've been hitting some runs at like 5 a.m. And then just before we hopped on, I was hitting 800-meter repeats at like times that were unfathomable to me, like even a year ago. And it's so hard to beat people that are having fun. Like
Yeah.
you can't. It's just
That's
because it's a game.
so cool. Yeah, it is.
Just a
It's hard
game.
to beat people that are having fun.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, I was thinking about getting to sprinting. And it's funny because I remember when a friend of mine told me, and I was like, no, I don't running, but because like my legs like completely got reworked over the last few years. And like I remember when I was younger and I had like knee problems and all this other stuff. And then like now, like, and it's funny, of course I didn't listen then. And now like here I am all these years later, and it's like, oh, the surgeon was right. The orthopedic surgeon, I didn't have any work done, but he was like, just grow a lot of muscle. And now, like, after being worked the last like 2 years and like having like legs that are,
Yeah.
like athlete legs, I'm like, oh, got it. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. And it's like, and then body movement. And then I've heard so many great things about sprinting. Marathons, I'll leave that to your, advice. But it turned into so many things, like between ice baths and infrared saunas and just and like breath work and all these different things we can do, and hikes. Like I do like at least one hike a week, something new, like just that movement, that body movement feels so good. For me, before I do the sprinting, I'm actually gonna jump into jiu-jitsu. That's like my next thing. So it's like next week is my first class because there's a grand opening here. I'm like, all right, let's go. Like that's how I want to do some body movement next. So we'll see.
Yeah. No, that seems like everybody I talk to that does it, it's like it's just a puzzle of your mind. And it's
Yeah,
just like it just seems like another thing that can completely unlock levels.
yeah. Yeah, and that to that point, I think that's the part that people might see active people and be like, "What is it for you guys?" And now I understand it, and it's just because like what happens is your body just starts to feel so good, and you're wanting to. That is it's a natural high,
Right.
and it feels so good that you're like, "I'm doing this from something good." I think I want to keep doing it. Like that,
Yeah.
that's a good addiction to have, is that movement and health for your body. Versus having to do it, yeah, I get it. And I tell people like, yeah, I get it. Like you can do it the convenient way, of course,
Right.
and get the convenient dopamine. But let me tell you something, like, what if eventually your body's just producing it all the time
Yeah.
without you even having to get the convenient of it? So the new convenience is that it's just happening to you always. Like play for that mode and see and get back to me and see if that's not like a different kind of like way you would want your, to feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. The real dopamine's a game changer. And when you're causing that, and I laugh because there was a post the other day that they're like recreating the woolly mammoth. And like I'm laughing because I'm like, and they talk about like recreating dinosaurs. And again, who knows what's really gonna go on. But a lot of people would be in a bad situation if that happened and like, the internet goes down hypothetically, like then it's gonna be like, the fittest actually survive. And it, I never obviously want it to get back to days like that where we're walking around and saber-toothed tigers are walking around. But
Right.
at the same time, I think where does this end? Especially with like the way men are these days. And I'm sure, being in the social media game, I know this is another tangent, but being in the social media game, like how do you feel about that?
Which part?
Like, yeah, well, that's it. Like there just aren't like masculinity really.
you know, um, so yeah, and you're seeing different people with different influential sizes
Mhm.
having very interesting conversations.
Right.
The way I look at it is that like for me, I look at it as like what makes a good man. Like, and all of these things are our responsibility, just like the women have for them to what makes them a good woman, and the work that they do for themselves independently, the way we do for ourselves, because ironically we also need each other. We actually think instead of battle of the
Right.
sexes, I think we actually should come back together, and I think you're starting to notice that a lot more. At least it's the hope. But as there's like all these layers, because I'm not going to sit here and shout like you should do this, and if you don't do this, because like then actually, um, I'm more of like I like Marcus Aurelius or Alexander the Great or Aristotle or Socrates or like servant leader type, where it's like I have to do the work, but I'm not gonna convince you to do it one way or the other. nor am I going to hold you in judgment either. But just know that like my interaction is going to be based on like whether or not you are being accountable for your world, because I'm here to constantly push the boundaries of me as a man and what my soul is here to do. So I'd rather lead by example, right? And so there's this weird balance, because I get it. Like I see when the people are like yelling at you know, and you know, you should this and you should that and all this other stuff. But when we do that, it causes more division. And I'd
Absolutely.
rather like, hey, I'm going to lead by example. And so for me as a man, I look at it as like, you know, it's just owning my decisions, being very clear, being very directional, being brutally honest. I don't even like to use the word brutal, but like just totally honest in all of in my feelings, in my decisions, in what's going on in my world, you know, in when it comes to relationships. No woman should ever have to assume anything about me. She should be able to know exactly who I am, what I stand for, where I'm heading, like what's going on in my world, you know, and you know, and know that I'm very clear. And so then you're more about growth orientation, right? Like you're both trying to like come together. You know, I'd said that I was actually writing a thread that's going up tonight about this, and it was like, you know, we should be complementary, not competition, right? Like I need you as an individual to do everything that makes you better, and I need to do the same thing. So our spaces are open to receive each other versus like, you know, go head to head against each other. And
Yeah.
so, you know, so leading as a man is, you know, it's got like, there's like these layers of these conversations online. And then, you know, and I think some are trying to, when they try to take it back to like the tradition, they say, and if you don't do this as a man, I'm like, okay, like,
Right. Yeah.
it's you know, they mean well, and they've got big followings. I'm watching, you know, and a few people have asked me, they're like, can you jump in the conversation? I'm like, when it's time, you know.
Right.
But and I try to have some of these conversations because I think there's that balance of like, as a man we should lead, and we should also listen.
Yeah.
And I just put this up on my stories about like the reason why I've been able to do well at times, especially in my life, is I learned from very, very strong women figures, not just the men that were male role models. I had women in my life, from my mother to other women, that like they kept me very honest. They kept me very like, you know, hey, like you need to be clear. You know, you can't be wavering. Like, you know, men, we think that we're, you know, we think that we're being very clear and like, no, this is what I want. Like, the moment a man gets defensive to a woman, period, end of story, he's unclear about something. My opinion, he's unclear about something, and a woman knows it. Their intuition knows it. They know it, and they're just waiting to see if you can like, you know, it.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know. So
So
yeah,
true.
it's a topic that I can just go like on tears with, because
No, but that was, yeah,
you know,
I
and I
totally
think it.
agree.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, no. I totally agree. And I think like you said, it's not the rah rah yelling and screaming. Like I love your approach to it, where it is just leading by example. And there isn't
Yeah.
one way to do it. And you kind of leave space for people to fill in the gaps where they may.
Yeah. You know, when we lead by example, we also, it's not like there's no force. You know what I mean? And so, and I lean into every conversation. We're having a conversation if we need to have a conversation. That's like, you know, but when you see sometimes the, you know, the side of like, no, you know, you're wasting my time. I gotta go. I gotta like, well, hold up. First of all, like deal with everything in front of you in that moment, deal with it. And but yeah, when we lead by example, you know, it also show, I think it tells a lot more to a woman, you know, especially, you know, in terms of like where we're coming from. And you know, and it's also changed the dynamic. It's been interesting because like, you know, I've made the best decisions I've ever made at this stage. And you know, there have been even times where like women were like, you know, hey, you know, is it so black and white for you? And one in particular was like, is it so black and white for you? I'm like, well, you mean like trusting my soul? And she's like, well, okay. And I was like, well, trusting my soul it is. I'm like, oh, you think making this decision in saying no to somebody I am attracted to physically and internally and all these things, you know, and like spiritually. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, hardest thing I'll ever do. It's so hard. And
Right.
she's like, huh. And I'm like, you're looking at it from rejection. She's like, yeah. And I was like, which by the way is what men have gone through a lot. I was like, I have to behave like a man. I have to behave like a man that like demonstrates what a good man is to you, which means I have to put truth over self-interest. And it hit her, this particular woman, very hard. She was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, I'm like, you're a queen, you're just not my queen. And if I was like, you don't think I don't go home and like say to God, like, why are you doing this to me? I'm
Right.
lonely. Like, everything is so good about this person, but like, I know that she's not my wife. Like, I know she's not for me. And I was like, you think that's easy? It's like, well, when you put it like that, I'm like, but see, the communication, having that talk, like, that's what makes us real men and women, like having the talk, like just talk, or friends, guys talking things out, or business partners talking it out, like, just dropping the mask and the ego and getting right into like dealing with it. And so it was very interesting. She was like, wow, like I hadn't really ever put it that way. I'm like, I have to behave like both the man that I am and becoming, and the man that demonstrates the kind of man you could be proud of, that would be for you without being for you. You think that that's easy.
Right.
I was like, that's actually, because I have to go against my ego, my desires, my loneliness, whatever, like how you feel good in the short term, but that's not really where I'm heading. You think that's easy and fun? I was like, it sucks. But what was cool is having that conversation. And this is something that I wish all men would understand, and women. Having that conversation was honest. And I said on a podcast episode that I created, was honesty is like foreplay, because it is like, it's very attractive quality, because you're not left to assuming anything or your ego getting, I mean, yeah, it may hurt a little bit. The truth can hurt, but you have so much love and respect from behaving like that. Like, you really are like, I like you as a person. Like, I dig you. I can trust my life with you. Thank you. And so, yeah, you may not end up together, or you may not do the business together. You may not, whatever. But you have so much love and respect because you can trust them, because they were real. That's what we need more of.
Absolutely. And with that, you kind of hit on exactly where I was going to go next, which was like saying no. And again, like obviously in that situation with the female, there are desires there, and being able to say no. So you mentioned earlier, like being at the place you are now with the wisdom you have now, what would you say to a younger version of yourself? And then I'm 27, so just me as a whole, as far as like saying no to those things, because I find myself a lot in that middle ground of like, I feel like, do I say no too much? You know what I mean? Like, especially when
Yeah.
it comes to like dating or going out drinking, even going out to eat dinner. Like, I'm just like, I'd rather cook my food. Like, but I'm like, where is that? It's so tough for me personally to find that balance. And I know it's for a good reason, but yeah, if you kind of want to touch on like, I guess it would be just be delayed gratification as a whole.
Yeah. Trust your soul, trust yourself, trust your soul. It's leading you, right? The body and the soul have this beautiful relationship, which are often going in opposite directions. Soul's like, hey, I know exactly where you need to go, and it's going to feel good. And the body's like, I actually want this right now, and this is what I'm trying to control, and this is what I need, and this is what I desire, and this. And I once heard that if the body and the soul could team up, the soul needs the body, the vessel, to move it, to make the blueprint happen, and the body just needs a blueprint to know where to go. And it's like, if those two can just match up, you just flow, right? I mean, obviously you still got work to do on this planet, and but so I'd say trust your soul, trust yourself, like, and if it brings you joy, like maybe you like cooking your food, and listen, when I eat out, honestly, it messes with me now, because I eat so clean that when I eat out, I'm like, oh, that really wasn't worth it, and I paid for that. I'm
Right.
like, I
It's
paid
true.
for my punishment. I was like, but sometimes I do go out, for sure. And I'll be, or with some friends. The cool thing is, after a while, everybody seems to pick like really great restaurants that are like also like healthy ingredients. So we're all kind of now, we're
Form a
all kind
table.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, the same, you know what I mean, in a lot of ways. But, or, look, if it's a certain instance where it's not, I learned that, hey, like, let me go out, let me enjoy the company of the people that I'm meeting back up with. And maybe I'm just eating light or nothing at all. I'm like, hey, you guys do your thing. I ate before I came, and owning that. Because sometimes every now and then, it's been a while, because again, like, everybody I'm around is kind of the same, but like, you get people like, oh, you and you're eating this. I'm like, really? Like, do you want to do that? Like, you want to dance? I'll dance with you if you want to dance. I'm like, let's talk about how you're dealing with this and dealing with that. Like, it's like, no, we're not going to go there. Listen, I'm here because I wanted to spend time with y'all, but you do you, I do me. You got to own that lane because yeah, sometimes the pressure is there, I think, from people. It can be, at least, but you know, saying no too much, it's a tough call. Again, like if you're doing the things that are bringing you joy, great, then you should stick doing that. If the pressure is mounting, I do believe in maybe taking a step back and maybe go say yes to something that maybe you wouldn't normally, just because maybe you need to get out of stagnancy. You don't want to be in stagnancy. You definitely want to be in movement and momentum. And yes, consistency can be very mundane and boring, so long as it's like, again, for the things that are bringing you joy. So if you're finding yourself not, like, breaking it up every now and then, going on maybe a week-long trip or a weekend trip somewhere, or doing something you wouldn't normally do, I think is very also needed, because it's very innovative and creative, and it's needed. Like, our body, our nervous system needs it too. So it's just again, just tuning in and saying, okay, like, one, I trust my soul. Two, how's my body feeling? And if my body is kind of giving me a signal, all right, maybe I need to put this thing down. Maybe I need to put the toy down for a minute and just step out and take a day, or take whatever amount of time that I need to reset. So
Yeah, no, totally. And another thing I definitely want to touch on was, how can people earn with their mind, not their tongue? What is, like, yeah, it's something that you say, and some advice kind of, I feel like it's very, very common now that people don't want to be in corporate, but someone that really has that itch for more and the entrepreneurship, like, what is something that you would tell them, basic stuff to start out?
learn systems. Start learning systems now, immediately. Don't look at the word systems and think boring and too techy and too um, like it's not fun. Believe me, you can apply creativity to systems, and everything is a system. Everything, right? James Clear said, you don't rise to your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And James Clear wrote Atomic Habits. Systems he's talking about is everything in your life is a system. Your body is a system that's governing itself while you sleep, right? Your calendar is a system that is dictating what you're doing with your time. But in business and creativity, like in when Naval said, earn with your mind, not with your time, or earn with your mind, yeah, not with your time. When we trade our time for money, time is the most valuable asset. So think about that. Giving up time for money, you think you are getting the valuable asset, when actually you're giving away the most valuable asset. Okay, so in business, what does that mean? Well, there's two things in business and in personal life. In business, how do you get things to work for you? Fundamentally. Now, a lot of people who work corporate understand this, because you're working for the people who figured that out. You're working for them. That's
Right.
how they're getting, So, but in a new modern world, and Naval was saying how, the internet allows for 8 billion monopolies. And what he was saying is that because now we have the ability to have these one-person businesses, where through technology, through access to unlimited amount of customer or client or fan or follower or whatever, we can serve at scale something of value, and use systems to govern them, handle it,
Right.
and earn in less time, more money, and then it buys us back more time. So on the personal side, how do you, even if you don't know it from a business standpoint, ask yourself, how do you buy back more time? Because you don't get any more of it. You only have from now until it's done. So how do you use more of it in the meantime? How do you buy back how you're spending your day? And earn with your mind was just sort of like, we are living in the information age. And you see people all online, like whether it's in the mortgages or, Budget Dog online, I think he was like a CPA, right? Like working for like $60,000 a year and like 90-hour weeks. And now he's like retired as well. Like at 30, he's retired as like him and his wife. And he's like, hey, I don't drive Lamborghinis. Like, let me show you how, to budget and like how to do finance. And so we're living in this beautiful creator economy, which you've heard me probably talk about or stress on like stories and stuff like that. The creator economy is it's a new style economy, every person gets to kind of do their thing that they love, that lights them up. And the value exchanges between them and an audience who's like, oh, I can actually use that for my business, my life, my health, my finances, my whatever. And then in that world that I'm now also creating, as the receiver of your services, I'm now employing it into my services that are now exchanging with everybody else. And now we have an economy of doers creating, exchanging value. And like, actually, it's almost like more like a concept of almost like Bitcoin in a way. It's like creator economy is a very interesting break from the system. And everybody's creating and earning. And from their knowledge and expertise and, driving that value to anybody that needs what they know, versus, or you can go back into the system, go to this expensive university, pay all this money, and their antiquated curriculum, and they're not really, adapting as fast as like this world is learning it online, and so it's such a fascinating time that like there's never been more of a time to earn with your mind, not with your time, meaning like you can scale creativity faster than you ever had before, still work, still accountability, still responsibility and systems. But now that's why we see like, independent musicians are like, I'm not going into that industry. Are you crazy? But I've got my fans. They pay the monthly here. I have new music here. I have merchandise here. I have a community that I, teach over here. I'm a speaker over here. I mean, we can scale creativity, less time, maximize output, maximize profitability, and with what we love and in serving. Wow. So that's what excites me about this whole new creator economy. And you're seeing every profession do it. CPAs, lawyers, engineers, doctors who become, they switch sides, go a little bit more holistic and naturopathic and like all the, getting to health and nutrition. You're seeing everybody pour in, and like the most random, gardeners, like farmers, everybody's going like, oh, here, I'll teach you guys irrigation. Okay. And here's something, here's a whole set of tools that might be of use to you. There doesn't cost much. It's better than going to, school of agriculture. And I'm the actual farmer. You can buy these tools, $150, and thousands are buying that versus going to, a high price university that's like, oh, wait, hold yourself. You got to do the politics first and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. No, thank you.
Yeah.
So business
is so true. Yeah. And you kind of touched on I believe you worked with Naval, correct? Because I read the Almanac.
No, I didn't. Man, did I refer the hell out of that book. No, I didn't work with him. I really admired also Jack Butcher, Visualize Value, who he did the illustrations, and then do I have the book down here? Or is it upstairs? And then but the Eric Jorgensen, who took Naval's tweet storm and made all that into the book, Naval, the Almanac of Naval. I just love promoting it. No, but I said on my website, I learned 2 very valuable lessons. One from my from my father, and then also from Naval's teachings, if you will. It just was this close. I'm this close to getting him on the podcast, but that'd be great just to have a great conversation with him, because he gets it. He's just like, he gets our generation. He thinks it's a great time that we're living in, and he sees like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity. Just the beauty of the time that we're living in is there's never been more opportunity. So it's kind of ironic sometimes with the narrative that's out there. There's never been more opportunity, but the contrast is the opportunity is there like never before, but every person has to own it for themselves. So we do need individuality, but you have to own the whole path. You can't use the system. You can't complain to the system. You can't you can't be lazy. And by the way, I don't care if you play video games for a profession, like, cool. You just have to own your path more than ever now than before. So the opportunities are actually beyond than we've ever had before, because the old paradigm, they're stuck and they're trying to tell you not to do the thing that you want to do while also telling you that you need them. It's like upside down world.
It really is.
So
yeah. So true. And the last question I always ask everybody is, what keeps you going? It's like, what's your deep why?
There's a lot. Um, I feel very connected to my soul, and I feel very connected to, there's many aspects of, I feel like, of my purpose and mission. I don't want people to feel stuck. I felt stuck. Like, when you even asked me about like being an entrepreneur when I was much younger and being an outcast, and you can feel lonely. You can feel like, is there something wrong with me? There's like all of this, stuff that comes at us. And like, we are meant to do incredible, amazing, value driven, worthy things, that we were already all these things internally. We're meant to be beautiful, sovereign human beings, like contributing to the world. And like, I feel the need to like affirm people, like, hey, like, I'll give you permission that you need no permission. I think what really keeps me going is I feel like strongly connected to this idea that you know we're moving in a beautiful new direction, and it's finally our time. And again, I know that it's met with a lot of other stuff happening, and it's very difficult to watch, for sure. But where we're moving, where we're heading, like, it requires all of us to show up as like our whole authentic selves, like exactly who we are, not some persona, not some external validation or credential or title or all this stuff. Like, we need who we like were from the moment we were born, and to like harness our gifts. And so a lot of that keeps me going. God keeps me going a lot of times, and when I say God, I don't always mean from like religion, because I know there's a lot of, God for me is a very personal relationship. I don't think any of us are separated from God the way sometimes it was made in the man-made, way.
Yeah.
And I can feel those conversations. I can feel my soul, and I put that on a story yesterday, like from an old video. It's like, I can feel my soul. It's like, hey, like, we got work to do. So it's sometimes from a place that it doesn't even almost have a description, like what keeps me going. That's when I realize, I go, wow, this is a whole, that's how I also really know it's my soul, because it's these levels that you're like, where does that come from?
Right.
Because it's
Effortless. Yeah.
you can't even give it like physical,
Right.
tangible, um, like anything to it. Like, it's so deeply rooted. And then, really good people around me who on my hardest days remind me of exactly who I am, even if I will always know it, but we're going to be our hardest critics, as I mentioned earlier. And so having people around you who keep you close to yourself is vital. And so that's also what keeps me going, because like, oh, and actually I'll say one final thing on that. Just when I think like, am I crazy myself, other people just reach out of nowhere, right? I mean, I'll hear things like from people, and some of it's been really tough. I mean, you hear people who go through death, divorce, disease, all the D's, apparently. No, like a lot of things, and they confide in you and confess in you. They're like, this came at me today when I needed it, or like, this just happened, and you have no idea. And I always think it's like beautiful ways that, God can talk to us directly. Our soul can talk to us directly when we listen. But I always say, like, when you need a sign, ask for the billboard, because like, it'll be so in your face, and it
True.
hits you so hard on these moments. You're like, got it. Here I was complaining today, and I got to keep going. And so it's the people you do it for, and serving the world. Like, you see, it's those times where at times they saved me more than I saved them. They didn't even know it, because I was like, especially early on in making this new shift and all this stuff. And you're like, why am I doing this? Is this wild? Is this like crazy? And then, yeah, you get hit hard, real hard in the face from, somebody coming in and just letting you know like what you just did. And you're like, oof, got it. Let's
Yeah.
keep going.
Absolutely. Your social media, like, if for people that follow you, obviously already know, and people that don't follow you need to. And everything you just said rings true, like straight through and through. Like, it's so cool to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's funny, because when I first started on social media years ago, I loved business and spirituality and intertwining the two. And so people thought that was like, so like, that's interesting. I'm like, well, when you
Right.
think about it, is it really that different? I was like, if I have this really insane understanding and relationship of like myself, my soul, my creativity, why am I doing things, the people, like all the stuff from a spiritual sense, isn't that going to bleed over into my business? You know, and I didn't fully understand it until we started moving into this creator economy where I'm like, oh, this makes sense. We're having a lot more people kind of inadvertently be. So we saw no entrepreneurs, then we saw a flood of entrepreneurs for the sake of the title. And now we're
Sure.
going to see entrepreneurs for the sake of creation, basically, right? And
Yeah.
Ray Dalio had the
Mhm.
if you've got to watch that, I'll leave it with this. He had that the animated, video on
Mhm.
empires and why they rise and fall. And they're usually in 250-year cycles. And why do they usually rise? There's less arguing and more creation and creativity and entrepreneurship that's happening, which creates this virtuous cycle of growth and development all around. And no one's really arguing or trying to like out the other because it's very cohesive, like, oh, we're creating civilization. And we've historically seen that with empires over thousands of years. And I feel like that model is done. And the new model that we're heading into is individual, like the 8 billion monopolies, as Naval puts, like we're moving into a new type of creation. And so everybody's kind of an entrepreneur at scale, building something that means something to them while providing value. And so I think it's cool when you really look at it from that perspective, you know?
It really, really is. Yeah. And honestly, man, I really appreciate your time. I know obviously you reached out recently and you hopped right on with me and it's I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking too. I appreciate that.